Good afternoon for those of you in the Central Time Zone or beyond. This is James Simon at the Center for Research Libraries. I want to introduce our speakers for the day. As I've mentioned, I'm James Simon. I'm the Director of International Resources here at CRL and Director of the Global Resources Network. With us in the room is Mary Wilkie, who's our Member Liaison and Outreach Services Director, and Virginia Kerr, who's our Director of Digital Resources. Each of us will be presenting. We have a number of other people in the room, and I'd imagine there's a number of you who are familiar with some of the people here at CRL. We'll provide our email contact at the end, so if you have follow-on questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. To start, for those of you who aren't as familiar with CRL as others, we are a consortium of 248 academic and independent research libraries that is primarily based in North America, but we also have a global audience as well. We have a global member in Hong Kong and a number of participants in different countries through our cooperative programs. The mission of CRL is to support advanced research and teaching in the humanities, sciences, and social sciences, and to ensure the availability of primary resources through preservation and acquisition of materials. Above all, CRL is a shared collection of more than 5 million books, journals, archives, etc., which we host centrally here in Chicago, Illinois, and send out through interlibrary loan, and increasingly through digital document delivery. Also, we work closely with our members and our individuals within those institutions to focus on specific areas of interest. We call them communities of interest, which identify and share information and collections for materials, particularly that are rare, endangered, at-risk materials. Here's the brief agenda for today's presentation. I will be giving a brief overview of CRL's collections. We'll talk about how we build some of those collections and some of the things that come out of that collaboration. Virginia will talk a little bit about our digital initiatives here, what's available now in electronic form and what's upcoming. Then we'll have a discussion with the librarians and faculty members about what emerging trends or challenges you're facing. Following that, we'll have a bit more of an informal discussion about other resources that are available or emerging related to Africana or African studies. And to wrap it up, we'll talk about future activities at the center under the rubric The Global Resources Collections Forum. Again, at any time, if you want to send us information or questions via the chat, we'll address those as we can. And during this discussion, we'll remind you to unmute your phones. And please do introduce yourself if you have questions. I just wanted to point out, for those of you who may not have seen, the most recent issue of our quarterly newsletter, Focus on Global Resources, was devoted to resources on Africa, and specifically focusing on the new World Newspaper Archive, African Newspapers module, and some of the other materials here relating to missionary collections and missionary work. We'll be covering some of that as we go. Proceeding forward, resources at CRL. CRL's collections of African-related materials or materials from Africa is wide and varied. We have extensive collections of materials that were published both within Africa and in the global north, as it were, U.S., England, France, etc., related to African studies as well. The collection is difficult to describe in 10 minutes or less, so this will necessarily be a brief overview of the collections, but we'll point you to how you can find more resources in CRL's catalog and website. This is just a quick tag cloud generated to show some of the subject headings that pop up most frequently within our collection related to Africa. You can see here extensive collections about history, description and travel, politics, newspapers and periodicals, as well as specific country-focused material as well. If you have specific questions about the nature of our collections, we can try to address those as well. But as a quick overview of the materials, we have about 20,000 items cataloged within our CRL's online catalog relating to Africa. This spans a wide variety of materials, as I mentioned, monographs, serials, and the like. In terms of the time period of what we cover, Some of the earliest material dates back to the 1700s, but the bulk of the material within our collection starts around 1850 and continues through the present. In terms of particular country strengths, South Africa is quite well represented, but we also have very strong collections related to Nigeria, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Senegal, Kenya, Liberia, and other countries as well. I've also put here the main strengths of collections from other countries, primarily being from the United States, England, in particular from the British Library and the National Archives collections, France, Germany, et cetera, et cetera. And the languages, predictably, I think are primarily English, French, and German. We have a nice representation of African languages in the collection as well. Here's a quick overview of what we'll talk about, and I'll only focus on a few of these given the limited amount of time that we have. But the kinds of collections that we have strengths in include newspapers, archival collections in microfilm, monographic collections, which are in print and in microfilm as well. Serials, and in particular, a strength of ours are the foreign official gazettes from African countries, and a nice selection of dissertations from African countries as well. Newspapers. This is one of the greatest strengths, I think, of our collection. We have close to 1,400 titles cataloged in CRL's online catalog for newspapers from Africa. I've listed here just a few of the greatest strengths. We have newspapers from most countries of Africa, although they are not completely comprehensive in terms of scope or date. South Africa has the earliest titles in our collection, starting at about 1800 with the Cape Gazette and a variety of other titles from the early colonial period. Also from Nigeria, Ghana, and Zimbabwe, some very early holdings. More towards the 20th century, we get into collections from Liberia. We have a nice set of Congo materials from the 1950s to the 1970s, as well as numerous newspapers from the 1990s forward. A lot of these have been collected both by CRL and preserved by the Cooperative Africana Microform Project, which is based here at the center. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. Some of the special collections of materials that we have are collected resources around specific time periods or regions. They include a fiche set of materials from Somalia that were preserved from the Library of Congress, and also some contemporary materials that were collected by the Library of Congress field offices. In terms of archival collections, this is a very broad term that I've just applied to a lot of the microfilm sets, which include both personal archives, institutional archives, sets of materials that were collected by scholars, etc. This is an extensive collection, both purchased from commercial micropublishers, original filming or acquisitions by CAMP, and other means of acquisition. I've grouped them roughly into some subject strengths here, including nice collections of missionary societies. I've listed a few of the major sets of materials here that are archival collections from these particular missionary societies within the UK, the United States, and elsewhere. And there are a lot of other related resources to missionary societies within our collections as well, including monographs and serials and the like. Continuing with some subject strengths, the colonial era is particularly well represented within our collection. We have nice microform sets relating to colonial British territories. You can see here the Cape Coast Province microfilm collection, the Cape of Good Hope records, and British Colonial Office pamphlets about Africa. There's an extensive collection as well from the German colonial ministry, some other materials in the French language, as well as from Belgium and the Netherlands. A subset of that, and continuing on into the present, are government publications from Africa, or official publications. I've listed a couple sets. We have a wide collection of materials related to the annual department reports relating to Africa. And those are fairly well represented sets in other library collections, but we have a near comprehensive set of those materials that were made available for sale. We've also done some original archiving through CAMP with the Kenya National Archives as well as in Tanzania for regional and district record books. These are quite interesting primary source materials and have been widely used in the past. Another strength of ours, primarily acquired through CAMP, are materials grouped around the liberation or freedom struggles in Africa. We've a number of scholarly collected sets that were particularly strong in the 1960s and 1970s. You can see a few listings here. I should mention at this point that these slides will be made available after this webinar, so if you're scribbling notes, you can also wait to receive the PowerPoint presentation after this. Sorry to not announce that before. In particular, with the liberation struggles, we're particularly well represented for South African struggles as well. I've listed a few of the collections here, including the Carter Karras collection and the Karras Gerhardt collection that spans, the latter one spans from 1964 to 1990. We have a wide body of material that was collected and preserved by the South African Institute of Race Relations, and some materials from the South African Police and Justice Department files. Also extensive collections of treason trial transcripts, which are frequently interesting and valuable to scholars. I'm going to, as a necessity of time, I think, wrap up with just a discussion about our serials. I mentioned also monographs and dissertations. We can talk a little bit more about those towards the end if we have some time. But just as broad classes of materials within our serials, we have African official statistical serials. This is a published microfilm set. We have a good degree of the Legislative Assembly debates from different countries, including Basutoland, etc., and colonial blue books. There are some press digests which summarize press events in different countries. We have, as I mentioned, the foreign official gazettes, which are collected in print and in microfilm from the majority of African countries, at least sources that we were able to find and make available. CRL strives to complete a comprehensive set of these materials. So if you know of particular collections that we might not have, we'd be happy to hear about those in order to acquire them. There's a lot of other material that I don't have time to cover in the course of this conversation, so I'm going to turn this over to Mary to talk a little bit about how we continue to acquire this material and provide some additional examples of content.
Hi, this is Mary. As a CRL library, you not only have access to the collections CRL presently owns, but you yourself help shape our collections through the various programs that we offer. The librarians and scholars who participate in our programs shape our collections through their own actions. They identify endangered resources. They nominate items for filming, digitizing, or purchase. And finally, by voting to prioritize belleted items, you all help shape our collection. You build our collections. The Area Microform Projects, or AMPs, are 6 area focus groups that institutions voluntarily join according to their interests. Participants in the AMPs use their expertise to identify, preserve, and make accessible unique, uncommon, and endangered area-specific research materials to scholars now and for the future. Of special interest to African scholars is CAMP, the Cooperative Africana Microform Project. As illustrative of the work CAMP does are the 3 sets of newspapers mentioned here. CAMP is supporting the filming of newspapers collected by the LC Field Office in Nairobi, for which they do not have the capacity to film. Without the support of CAMP, this material might not be accessible for scholars here and in the future. CAMP members in some cases often contribute their own issues to extend the run being filmed. Most of the titles in the 3 projects listed here are not held by libraries outside the country of origin. Many major sets or collections are too costly for individual institutions to acquire. Such sets also tend not to be readily available through an interlibrary loan. Last fall, the Church Missionary Society Archive, Section 7, Parts 1 and 2, were on the purchase proposal ballot. These sections deal with the Society's work in Africa, and they were ranked high enough to be purchased through that program. The illustration you see here is not from the set purchase, but rather from a children's book which tells the life story about one of the Society's missionaries. Bishop Harrington kept a diary in which he included sketches of his life in Africa. CRL has digitized the work, and one can learn more about this in the current issue of Focus that James mentioned earlier. The article, CRL Resources on 19th Century Christian Missionary Work in Africa, mentions both the Society archives and also other items from CRL's collections. Under the CRL Purchase Proposal Program, any member library may nominate for CRL to purchase materials in any format that meet certain criteria. I want to remind people that nominations are currently open through the end of September, and if you have suggestions for nominations, contact your library's representative for the program or send me an email message for further information. The Shared Purchase Program allows for the acquisitions of costly sets for which members pledge funds to cooperatively purchase the material. The program is entirely voluntary. Items purchased this way may not have been of wide enough interest to rank high on the ballot for the purchase proposal, or perhaps the nominating library did not wish to wait for the voting in the fall for the purchase proposal program. Through the program, the set of government publications relating to the Cape of Good Hope was acquired in 2005. The illustration here is not from the set, but rather from a work in our collection which we digitized. Through CRL's Demand Purchase Program, researchers can request CRL buy newspapers, archival materials, and foreign doctoral dissertations for their own use. In this way, CRL acquired the entire 14 DVD disc set of the Saldrew Clippings collection for use by a professor at about the same time that Aluka acquired their first 1,000 images from that collection. Similarly, a professor needed a run of an Egyptian newspaper for which CRL owned but did not have the dates he needed. We acquired the years needed. And finally, we purchase on demand doctoral dissertations, not only on topics related to Africa, but as in this case, from an institution in South Africa. Unlike other CRL collection programs, the Scholars Access Program will provide access to material that may or may not be added to CRL's physical collection. On the slide here, you see that we provided limited time access for a professor at a member library that did not have the funds available for this important research. He needed not only for their current research project, but for a class that they will be teaching this fall. Finally, I want to mention the undergraduate research work group. It identifies small, focused collections of primary source material for digitization by CRL to support upper-level undergraduate coursework and instruction. The group also seeks to include unique material held by member libraries that complements identified themes. We are presently involved with scanning some archival materials from a member's special collection. The materials is from the archives of a missionary who worked with the Ojibwe tribe in Minnesota. While the group has not yet done any African-related material, I have included some shots of materials we digitized from our collection. Do contact me for more information about anything I said in this section, and I will now turn it over to Virginia.
Good afternoon. It's an important priority for CRL to provide essential research materials in digital format wherever possible. African source materials are a significant component of our digitization programs. One key strategy for converting CRL collections to digital format is our commitment to an in-house digital production unit, whose capacity has grown to over 700,000 pages per year, selected in response to patron requests for loan of materials, as well as planned scanning of prioritized selections. These examples indicate the range of topics and types of materials among nearly 1,000 items specifically on Africa, from a total of 10,000 CRL items already scanned to date. Digitized CRL titles relating to Africa include a number of monographs originally microfilmed by CAMP, such as the children's biography of the early missionary Mary mentioned earlier, with charming illustrations of his first landing on local terrain, as well as histories of mission efforts established early in the colonial era. We also have scanned selected bound volumes. I'm showing here an illustration from a guide issued by the Cape Government Railway Department. In addition, we have created text-searchable digital versions of the detailed printed guides to extensive microfilm archive sets held at CRL to assist in locating individual titles within the microfilm sets. I'd like to mention that most individual titles digitized from CRL collections have MARC catalog records produced here at CRL, which are accessible through WorldCat, and are also available to CRL libraries for loading locally upon request, with quarterly updates. The individual titles scanned on site at CRL are available in PDF format, with searchable text where appropriate. And here I'm showing the multiple results from a search through our digital scope of the of CRL's OPAC, and also just a segment from a HTML page linked from the catalog record, which then links to the PDF of the scanned document. In our in-house digitization efforts, we do scan titles which are protected by copyright, limiting access to patrons at CRL libraries in support of research and study, following the guidelines of fair use. Note that institutions must configure local proxy servers to provide access to affiliates from off-site. And here I'm showing you an example of the agreement, a click-through agreement for readers for materials which have the strongest level of copyright protection, which we've scanned for research use. On CRL's redesigned website, you'll find a list of special digital collections, each having their own search interfaces, such as a group of rare manuscripts on slavery in 19th century African Muslim society, uncovered by scholar John Hunwick of Northwestern University. On this digital collections page, we also remind the researcher that all digitized CRL materials are also discoverable through our OPAC. Through a new partnership with the Law Library Microfilm Consortium, or LLMC, we will be expanding access to primary source digital collections. The LLMC digital database, established in 2003, currently includes over 20 million pages of legal and government-related materials, growing by more than 5 million pages annually. CRL and LLMC will work with a joint steering committee to add materials supporting the interests of CRL libraries. One field identified for expansion is African legal materials. LLMC has access to extensive materials from the bibliography Common Law Abroad, documenting the heritage of constitutional and legal titles published in or for the British dependencies. Other African material, especially up to the period of independence, may be identified for LLMC digitization from among the holdings of CRL libraries and various other repositories. By late August, the LLMC digital database, currently available to some CRL members through their law libraries, will be available to all CRL libraries gratis on an introductory basis. We encourage CRL libraries to explore this content's rich potential for interdisciplinary research, and we invite your recommendations for additional source materials on African legal topics or other source materials. After the initial year, CRL will propose terms of continued access to the materials for other interested CRL libraries. Another way CRL is working to gain improved access to research materials is through support of the British Library's electronic theses online service, known also as ETHOS. ETHOS offers a single point of access for scholars to obtain digitized theses from participating UK higher education institutions. Sometimes there is a charge for the digitization of the title. In those cases, CRL will cover the required fees through the demand purchase program already mentioned by Mary. CRL has also contributed funds for the British Library to digitize 400 theses on Islamic culture and politics, including those based in Islamic Africa. Titles were chosen from CRL's existing collection of microfilmed British theses. To date, over 300 of these selected have been digitized. Finally, an important strategy to accelerate digitization of CRL collections is our partnership with Newsbank, a division of Redex, to assemble and digitize rarely held microfilm of colonial-era African newspapers as part of the World Newspaper Archives. Funded by CRL member libraries, including 38 charter supporters, the WNA-Africa module, launched early in 2010, has nearly reached its goal of 450,000 pages, covering more than 40 titles published between 1800 to 1923. Access to the World Newspaper Archive is now available through CRL at a reasonable rate to all CRL libraries. James noted that the most recent issue of CRL's quarterly online newsletter, Focus, features articles about the content of the African newspaper module of the WNA, with notes on uses scholars are already making of it.